Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to apologize, first for my English, but also because for someone who is used to be behind the cameras, to be in front of the audience can turn a bit difficult. So I will try not to suddenly run away from the stage. I will try my best. I want to start by showing some pictures I took in Southern Europe during the past few years. These images are the end of the story, so let me please start from the beginning. I studied sociology in Madrid, the city where I was born, and also in Amsterdam. Sociology is knowledge. It helps you to understand the world, something that seemed very interesting to someone like me. It teaches you that realities are very complex and that the answers and possible solutions to any social problem usually tend to be so. But something didn't work for me. I kept asking myself, how could we transmit this knowledge to each other in an effective way? While studying many of the great global problems, climate change, hunger, wars, migrations, inequality, I kept thinking, how can it be that we know so much about these problems, but at the same time, nothing changes? Or it changes very little, or it changes very slowly. And the first word that constantly came to my mind was empathy, or I could say the lack of empathy. By the time I started studying sociology, I also started to learn photography. I had always liked to take pictures, but if you were a child in the 80s and 90s, the relationship with photography was very different from the one we have nowadays. During years, I became obsessed with the idea of combining photography and sociology, photography and research, photography and writing, thinking that maybe that could be a way to bring these theories to the audience and perhaps get to learn and tell about the stories I was interested in. As you can see, I wasn't very smart since I was already trying to invent a discipline that had already existed for many years, photojournalism. So I finally decided to focus on photojournalism. But once again, a very frequent question in my profession kept coming to my mind. Does photojournalism work to change things? Is photojournalism worth it? This is a question we are asked many times, probably too many times, and that we also ask ourselves. I believe it is a very naive question, but at the same time, I think it happens to be a true, very important question that those who devote their life to this profession, we ask ourselves many times. A humanitarian crisis does not end with the publication of a photograph, neither a war, and it would be very naive to think that way. But that doesn't mean there is no value in this way of transmitting information, emotions, and knowledge. I think that the effects of photojournalism can be understood in the short, mid, and long term. And I will start with the short term. In the short term, photojournalism can be used to call attention. In the past few years, I have spent a lot of time covering the migrant routes in the Mediterranean and in Europe. And I would like to take advantage of the fact that we are in Greece to give an example of those possible positive effects in the short term. In 2015, I guess you all know, more than 1 million people crossed the Mediterranean to reach Europe, and about 800,000 did it through the GNC. People risked their lives, and more than 3,700 people died in the attempt that year. I want to show now some photos I took on the Greek island of Lesbos in 2015. The last pictures were taken on October 28, 2015. That day, a boat carrying 300 people from Turkey to the island of Lesbos capsized. That day, a lot of people died. And that day, there were very few professional rescuers on the spot. But at least there were some of them. And some of those professionals told us they had decided to travel to the Greek islands after watching images, photos, and videos that had been published in the previous days, weeks, and months. Did anything change? Maybe I'm the one who is too naive. But during that day, and during many other days, I saw how professional rescue teams that had decided to travel to the islands after watching images saved lives. And that, to me, is a very small and simple change that is worth it. If the publication of a photograph doesn't push millions of people to the streets to stop a war on the other side of the world or to demand a solution to a humanitarian crisis, it would be a mistake to think that that photograph wasn't worth it. Because that doesn't usually happen. And it is very difficult to achieve that goal. Very difficult, trust me. But there is another way to make this work. Through photojournalism, we can call the attention of a certain number of specialized organizations that can intervene in a specific crisis or that can push the authorities to act in a different way. I obviously don't think that photos and videos were the only reason for those rescue teams to move to the Greek islands, but I do believe that they played an important role on that. Let's move now to the midterm. In the midterm, the constant reproduction by the media of photographs can be sometimes turned negative for the story we are trying to tell, even if we don't want that, and we obviously don't want that to happen. I want to show now a photo I shot in Melilla in 2014. Melilla is a 12 square kilometers Spanish enclave located in northern Morocco and separated from the Moroccan province of Nador by a 6 meters high triple metal fence. In this photograph, well, not in the photo, but in that moment, there were 500 young Africans jumping from Morocco into Spain to enter European soil. During months, I became obsessed with the idea of taking this photo. And by the time it was published, when I finally shot it, and it was published by many media, but not always in a way that seemed right to me. Many outlets used images like this one to spread a message of invasion, while, for example, the number of people that managed to jump that fence during that entire year was about 2,000 people. And that's a very small figure for a place of 500 million inhabitants, such as the European Union. I want to show now some other pictures I took on July 25, 2017, aboard a rescue vessel during a migrant rescue operation in front of the Libyan coast. There were 168 survivors aboard that rubber boat and 13 corpses. More people had fallen into the water before we found the boat. They had spent more than 24 hours at sea, on the high seas. And among the dead, there were mothers, husbands, and other relatives to the survivors. The situation in the central Mediterranean route, the most dangerous one in the Mediterranean, has been largely published by the media. And the photographs taken by a great number of photographers did help to raise awareness among some sectors of the European population about the risk that thousands of Africans are facing at sea. And they also helped to raise funds for the organization helping them. But at the same time, the way those images were published did also help to increase the feelings of fear and racism among some other sectors of the European population. The reaction of the Italian authorities to the situation in Libya and the central Mediterranean has been to close the borders, to reach an agreement with Libyan authorities to externalize the control of that border and the criminalizations of those NGOs that were operating there. I obviously don't think that photos and videos can be a reason for the European authorities to reach agreements and to close borders with Turkey, Libya, or Morocco, but I do believe that the way they are published does influence the public debate. The constant reproduction of images by the media of people arriving in Southern Europe without any context, without a good explanation, doesn't seem to help for the people to empathize with the story of those ones who appear in those images. Photojournalism, as you can see, can be a powerful tool, but it can also be a dangerous one, depending on the way it is used by the media. I want to jump now to the long term. The long term is what I find truly interesting. While in the short and mid-term, the consequences of photographs are greatly affected by the way they are used by the media, it is in the long term where we can observe the power they have by themselves. The pictures that we are taking today will remain in the future and will help us to remember what we did, what we allowed others to do, and what should never happen again. If we understand that, broadly speaking, what we need in the world is people who act for good by their own will, we must understand that what we really need is education and knowledge. And I would also add the word empathy. Environment, family, teachers, school, schoolmates, many things have a key role to play on this. But also, the books we read, the movies we watch, the information we produce, and therefore also the photographs. Photographs are one of the most simple units of information we can produce, if not the most simple one. And that's why they have such a powerful capacity to evoke emotions and to help others to empathize with people they don't personally know. I want to show one more picture. This photo was taken by Alice Seeley in Congo in 1904. On the image, we see a man posing as he observes the hand and foot of his 5-year-old daughter, who had been dismembered for not achieving to collect the amount of rubber that the soldiers of King Leopold from Belgium were forcing the native population to collect. Seeley's photographs were used in a human rights campaign, and they helped to start putting an end to the colonial rule in Congo. I hope that the photographs that we are taking today will have a similar impact in the future as this photo had on me the first time I saw it. Excuse me. I believe that photojournalism can help us to make questions, to question ourselves. It can help us to empathize with others. It can bring awareness and knowledge, and it can push us to start thinking. And I believe that anything that makes us think is worth it. Thank you very much.